I absolutely hate traveling, especially for work. But about a year ago, my job required me to take a trip to this town about 3 hours away. It was one of those places that everyone raves about. Super scenic, lots of nature, beautiful hiking trails. So I figured, why not turn it into a mini getaway? I invited my wife along. She usually hates when I travel for work, so this felt like the perfect compromise. She could spend the days shopping, hiking, or just relaxing, and I'd be free every afternoon and evening for us to hang out. We ended up booking this cute little rental house online. It was pretty secluded, not quite in the middle of nowhere, but definitely separated from the neighbors by a dense wall of trees. When we first arrived that night, we checked out the place, and I remember my wife looking around and saying she'd love to buy a house just like this someday. It was on the smaller side, but it had this huge basement that was completely packed with old storage boxes. Little did I know, that short trip was about to turn into an absolute nightmare. The next morning, my alarm went off at 6 a.m. I rolled over to turn it off, and the very first thing I noticed was that my wife wasn't in bed. That instantly gave me a jolt of adrenaline. I got up, walked out into the kitchen, and found her sitting on one of the bar stools, sipping coffee and staring blankly at her phone. When I asked her why she was up so early, she looked at me, and I could see the pure exhaustion and fear in her eyes. She told me she couldn't sleep because of something that happened in the middle of the night. She said she had rolled over, and through the pitch blackness, she thought she saw someone standing right in the corner of our bedroom. She tried to squint and focus her eyes, but it was just too dark to be 100% sure. Terrified, she rolled back over, but she couldn't fall back asleep. At one point, she was just about to drift off when she heard a distinct rustling noise coming from that exact same corner. After that, she was wide awake. She said she just couldn't shake the gut-wrenching feeling that someone was watching us. At 5 a.m., she couldn't take it anymore. She got up, made coffee, and had been sitting in the kitchen ever since. I felt terrible for her. I got ready for work, and before leaving, I asked if she was going to be okay. She told me she was going to shower, get dressed, and just spend the whole day exploring the town. She made it very clear that she did not want to stay in that house alone for a single second longer than she had to. As I was walking out the door, she was laying her clothes out on the bed for after her shower. I kissed her goodbye, and she hopped in the shower. According to her, when she got out of the shower, she noticed something weird. Her clothes on the bed were slightly different from how she had left them. Instead of being neatly folded and stacked on top of each other, they were half unfolded and thrown into a single sloppy row. Her heart dropped. She was already on edge, but she tried to convince herself it was just her imagination playing tricks on her. She got dressed as fast as she could, but then she realized her socks were gone. She knew exactly where she had left them, but now they were just magically missing. Feeling like she was losing her mind, she grabbed another pair, ran out of the house, and called an Uber to town since I had the car. When she was texting me later that morning, I could tell something was way off. She was giving me these blunt, one-word answers, which is totally unlike her. Luckily, my meeting wrapped up early, so I met her for lunch in town. She looked awful. That's when she told me about the clothes being moved and the missing socks. I didn't know what to say. I believed her, but I just couldn't wrap my head around what could possibly be happening. Since I was done with work for the day, we spent the rest of the afternoon distracting ourselves in town. By the time we had dinner back at the house, she seemed much better. It felt like whatever weird vibe was bothering her earlier had finally passed. We were dead wrong. In the dead of winter, well, the dead of the night, she violently shook me awake. She whispered that she heard a weird noise. The second I opened my eyes, I heard it too. It sounded like heavy, deliberate footsteps walking around inside the house. I could feel her literally shaking next to me. She begged me not to leave the bed, but I needed to know if someone was in the house with us. I quietly slipped out of bed and crept through the dark hallway. The only thing out of the ordinary was that one of the closet doors was standing wide open. I know it sounds stupid in hindsight, but I rationalized it. I assumed the door had just unlatched and swung open on its own. I'd seen old doors do that before. I even convinced myself that the heavy sound we heard was just the door clicking open. I checked inside the closet just to be safe, and it was empty. I went back to the bedroom and told my wife the house was clear and we had nothing to worry about. But she knew. She had this gut feeling that something was deeply wrong. She didn't sleep a wink, so I stayed up with her for the rest of the night. The next morning, she got dressed the second I did. She refused to stay in that house without me. When we met up for lunch again, she looked at me with tears in her eyes and asked if we could just go back, pack our bags, and leave. I felt like absolute trash because I had to tell her we needed to stay one more night. I had one final mandatory morning meeting the next day that I couldn't miss. The thought of spending another night in that house completely crippled her. I offered to get us a hotel room, but since I had already spent a ton of money renting this house, she reluctantly agreed to tough it out for one last night. When we got back to the property, we packed up all of our luggage so we could throw it in the car and leave the very second my meeting ended the next morning. We ordered a pizza that night and just sat in the living room. I could tell she was terrified of going to sleep, so we ended up playing a trivia game on my phone to pass the time. Every so often, we would hear this faint thumping noise coming from the basement, and every single time it happened, my wife would visibly crumble. I kept telling her it was just the house settling, but she wasn't buying it. Finally, I couldn't take the tension anymore. I decided to go down and check the basement one more time. She begged me, crying, not to go down there, but I told her I wanted to prove to her that the house was safe so she could finally get some peace of mind. I opened the basement door and walked down the creaky wooden stairs. I looked all around the room. There were towering stacks of storage boxes everywhere, casting long, twisted shadows. There was only one light bulb down there, and it was terrible. It gave off this dim, sickly yellow glow. I scanned the room, saw nothing, and sighed with relief. Just as I turned around to head back upstairs, something caught the absolute edge of my eye. I froze. I slowly turned back around. Standing dead still in the far dark corner of that room was a man wearing a red baseball cap. He was standing so incredibly still that for a split second my brain tried to convince me it was a coat rack or a mannequin. I took one slow, trembling step closer, and the man blinked. I completely lost it. A wave of pure terror hit my chest. I turned and sprinted up those basement stairs like my life depended on it. I burst into the living room and screamed at my wife, "Get to the car right now! Go, go, go! I'll grab the bags." We had 3 bags in total. I grabbed 2 of them, threw open the front door, and chucked them onto the grass. My wife ran to the car and started throwing them into the trunk while I sprinted back inside to grab the final bag. I dashed into the bedroom, ripped our charges out of the wall, and grabbed the last suitcase. As I was running back down the hallway toward the front door, I froze. The basement door was now wide open, and the hallway closet door was slightly ajar. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I took one deep breath, put my head down, and literally sprinted past the closet and the basement door. I flew out the front house, threw the bag into the back seat, slammed the door, and peeled out of the driveway. Once we were down the road, I called the rental manager, panicking, and told her that there was an intruder living inside the house.
The woman on the phone actually started arguing with me, trying to tell me I must have been mistaken. I got so angry and frustrated that I just slammed the phone down and hung up. I don't even know if she ever bothered to follow up. Thankfully, we made it out alive and completely unharmed, but just because we got away unscathed doesn't make it any less horrifying. That man was literally wandering around the house watching us the entire weekend. My wife wasn't crazy. She did see someone standing in our bedroom on that first night. It was that guy from the basement. I don't even want to think about what he wanted from us, besides my wife's socks. I know I could have pushed the police or the rental company harder to investigate, but honestly, I just wanted to let it be and put it behind me. Having a whole house to yourself when you travel sounds amazing in theory, but I think I'm strictly sticking to hotels from now on. They might be creepy sometimes too, but at least there you expect to have people around. People who hopefully won't be standing in the corner of your room watching you sleep.
The next story. I love to travel, but I absolutely hate traveling alone. So whenever I'm planning a trip, I usually try to bring whatever girl I'm seeing at the time along with me. One of the most memorable trips I ever took was down to Costa Rica with this girl, Julie, who I was dating back then. We stayed at the Four Seasons, and let me tell you, it was a damn beautiful resort in every possible way. Easily one of the nicest places I've ever stayed in my life. But that trip is memorable to me not just because of how beautiful it was, but because of the insanely weird, deeply disturbing experience we had toward the end of it. We were staying there for 4 nights, which, trust me, already cost me a pretty penny. The place was definitely not cheap, but the amenities were incredible. For the first 3 days, life was honestly amazing. Total paradise. But on night 3, everything changed. Late that night, after we grabbed dinner, we sat out on the beach and watched this cool fire show. As the night went on, the pool and the public lounge areas slowly started to clear out until eventually it was just the 2 of us left awake. The atmosphere was perfect, so we decided to run back to our room, grab the bottle of tequila we'd brought, a few mixers, and head over to the hot tub by the pool. Now, this hot tub was pretty secluded. It was covered in just about every direction by thick trees and tropical plants, leaving only a tiny, narrow opening to get in and out. There was also a built-in waterfall feature in the hot tub that made a ton of noise, which was great because it meant we could listen to music and talk as loud as we wanted without bothering anyone. We were having a great time, drinking and just chilling out, but the good vibe was abruptly ruined. Through a small gap in the plants, I noticed something through the shadows. Someone was standing on the other side of the walkway, creeping around. This wasn't just a guest walking back to their room. Whoever this was, they were crouching down low in the bushes, intentionally spying on us inside the hot tub. My stomach dropped. I immediately shouted, "Hey!" As you know, trying to awkwardly scramble out of a pool or a hot tub takes a few seconds. By the time I actually got my feet on the concrete walkway, I saw a dark silhouette hurrying away before turning a sharp corner and completely disappearing. Julie was calling out to me, telling me to just come back and leave it alone, but my adrenaline was pumping. I ran ahead and turned the exact same corner the guy had just bolted past. When I did, I saw absolutely nothing, just an empty, pitch-black trail leading toward the guest units, and ironically, it was heading in the exact direction of our room. When I walked back to the hot tub, Julie and I tried to have a mild laugh about it, but honestly, the vibe was completely dead. The illusion of privacy was gone, and we just felt exposed. We grabbed our towels and started walking back to our room. To get from the pool section back to our unit, you had to walk down this long path that was incredibly dark at night. It was sandwiched right between the guest buildings on the left and a thick, pitch-black jungle on the right. We were walking, and right when we got directly across from our unit, which was on the first floor, we heard this violent rustling coming from the jungle to our right. Look, It's a tropical jungle. There are animals everywhere, so you hear weird noises all the time. But this specific rustling stood out because it sounded much bigger, heavier, and more intense. It sounded undeniably human. Julie froze. She was terrified and whispered, "Let's go inside, please." I told her to go ahead and handed her our wooden room keycard. I stepped closer to the edge of the path, squinting into the pitch-black jungle, and that's when I heard it. This bizarre, low, buzzing sound. It didn't sound like a bug or a nocturnal animal. It sounded like a human being making a low, guttural grumbling or buzzing noise with the back of their throat. It was incredibly glitchy and psycho. Suddenly, whatever or whoever was hiding in there scattered away, rushing deeper into the thick brush. I was left standing there with my heart pounding into my throat. I turned, bolted inside the room behind Julie, and slammed the heavy door shut. Julie didn't hear the creepy throat noise, but she definitely heard the person scurrying away. It felt like we were actively being stalked. We locked all the deadbolts and went to bed, comforting ourselves with the fact that nobody could get into a locked room. The next day, while we were lounging by the beach, we decided to tell one of the resort workers about the sketchy encounter from the night before, just as a heads up for the staff and other guests. We stayed out on the beach for a few hours. During that time, a man dressed in a resort employee uniform walked right up to our lounge chairs with a professional camera. He smiled warmly and told us to pose for a picture. We didn't think anything of it, so we smiled and he snapped a photo. He said thanks, smiled again, and walked away. We watched him go, fully expecting him to walk up to the other couples on the beach to take their pictures too. But when we looked up just a few seconds later, the guy was completely gone. He hadn't stopped for anyone else. He had vanished off the beach. Also, there was another detail that we realized in hindsight. Literally every single employee at this resort was a local Costa Rican. This dude, however, was white. And I don't just mean fair-skinned. This guy was whiter than we were. Julie and I noted how weird that was amongst ourselves, but eventually let it go. Skipping ahead to that night, it was our final night, and things were going great. We had a nice dinner, watched the sunset, and packed our bags because we had an incredibly early flight the next morning. We were totally exhausted, so we turned off the lights and fell asleep pretty easily. However, in the dead of the night, I suddenly woke up. The room was still pitch black. It had to be somewhere between 12 a.m. and 1:30 a.m. Our suite had a beautiful layout where the bed faced a private patio with a massive glass sliding door. The patio itself was entirely screened off to keep the jungle bugs out. Because we wanted to hear the relaxing sounds of the ocean waves and the jungle wildlife while we slept, we had left that massive glass sliding door wide open, relying just on the mesh screen. But as I lay there in the dark, I heard a sound out on our patio that made my blood run cold. It was the unmistakable, faint electronic beep of a digital camera capturing a photo. I froze, thinking I was just dreaming. I stayed completely still, staring at the screen door. And then I heard it again, the distinct click, shutter, and beep of a camera. I sat straight up in bed, and there, standing right on the other side of the mesh screen on our private patio, was a tall, dark silhouette. Someone was standing inches from our open room, actively taking photos of us sleeping in our bed. I snapped. I shouted, "Hey!" sounding as angry as possible, but deep down I was absolutely terrified. The tall black silhouette flinched, turned, and sprinted off our patio, disappearing into the dark jungle trail. Julie jolted awake, screaming. I turned on the lights, told her what I saw, and slammed the heavy glass sliding door shut, locking it tight.
I immediately called the front desk, my voice shaking with anxiety, and demanded they send security to our room right away. An employee arrived about 10 minutes later, and I unloaded everything on him. The stalker in the hot tub, the creepy buzzing guy in the jungle, the fake beach photographer, and now this. The guard looked at me with a pale face and said, "Sir, the resort does not have any employees walking around taking photos of guests." That confirmed our worst nightmare. It was the exact same guy. We had been hunted by a lone wolf stalker for the past 48 hours. I demanded a new room immediately. They ended up moving us to a secure suite, much closer to the main lobby hall. Needless to say, we kept the patio door in that one locked tight.
We woke up incredibly early the next morning for our airport shuttle. While we were checking out at the front desk, the manager asked to speak with us. He brought us into the back office and showed us the security camera footage from the past 2 days. Watching that tape was the most horrifying, confusing thing I have ever experienced. There was the white man in the fake uniform. The footage showed him creepily wandering around the resort grounds at all hours of the day and night. But the most disturbing part? The cameras showed that out of the hundreds of guests staying at that massive resort, he was only tracking us. He followed us everywhere, hiding behind pillars and trees, taking endless photos of us when we weren't looking. We couldn't stay to watch the rest because we were going to miss our flight, but the management promised they would hand the tapes over to the local police and take immediate action. We were just incredibly relieved to get into the shuttle and leave that country behind. I followed up with the resort a few days later, but they just apologized and told me they had no new updates. The guy had completely slipped away. I don't see Julie anymore. We broke up a while ago. But this is a truly insane, deeply disturbing story that the two of us will share for the rest of our lives. Sometimes, late at night, I honestly want to reach out to her just to talk about it again, just to remind myself that it wasn't a nightmare and that there really are monsters out there wandering around, waiting for you to fall asleep. The next story. I absolutely hate reliving this story, but it is so deeply unsettling that I feel like I need to share it. About a year ago, I managed to get a week and a half off from work, so I decided to travel back home to see my parents. I live and work down in South Carolina, but my family is still up in Massachusetts. It's a pretty long haul, but it's usually an easy, straightforward drive. My parents are older and retired now, and they don't get to leave the house much because my dad severely messed up his back before he retired. So I came up with this genius idea. I decided I was going to drive straight through the night and surprise them on their doorstep in the morning. I only told my brother I was coming, just so at least one person knew I was out on the road. Now, usually I despise driving at night, but I've always found that this specific route is way easier overnight. There's barely any traffic, so I can just throw on a podcast, cruise, and relax. But my absolute least favorite part of the entire drive is when I have to pass through Pennsylvania. No disrespect to anyone from PA, but that state just feels like it never ends. It's nothing but endless mountains and winding, dangerous roads. Not to mention, it feels like every single time I drive through there at night, it's so incredibly foggy that I feel like I'm driving through a solid, endless wall of white. And this trip was absolutely no exception. I was white-knuckling my way through the fog, staring intensely at the road, when I suddenly hit a detour sign. Apparently, there had been a massive accident ahead and the highway was shut down. I was redirected off the main interstate and onto this old, local country road. I kept driving for what felt like forever, and a heavy sinking feeling hit my stomach. I was totally lost. It was just a pitch-black, deeply foggy road with zero signs of life anywhere.
To make matters worse, my phone completely lost service. No bars. My GPS stopped working, so I had no way of knowing where I was or which way I was even heading. By this point, it had been hours since I left South Carolina, and exhaustion was hitting me like a brick. I was scanning the darkness for a gas station or even a tiny rest stop. I desperately just needed to shut my eyes for a second. But something about this desolate road felt wrong, and I didn't feel comfortable pulling over onto the shoulder. Driving in heavy fog forces your brain to focus extra hard, which makes you twice as tired. Before I knew it, my head started dropping. I was nodding off. I knew I should have pulled over immediately, but I stupidly thought I could hold on just a little bit longer. Well, I couldn't. I dozed off for a second too long, and I completely lost control of the car. A loud, violent car crash, screeching metal, shattering glass, followed by tense, heavy music. I jerked the wheel, but it was too late. My car slammed into the guardrail at full speed, flew over it, and rolled down into a deep, steep ditch. Miraculously, the car flipped a couple of times, but landed right back on its wheels. I sat there, frozen, trembling from head to toe. It was without a doubt the most terrifying moment of my entire life. If you've ever been upside down inside a rolling vehicle, you know exactly what that kind of panic feels like. I just sat in the dark for a few minutes, trying to catch my breath and check if I was bleeding. I grabbed my phone to see if I had service, but the screen was completely shattered and dead from the impact. Because of the pitch blackness and the fog, I couldn't tell how bad the damage was on the outside. I tried to shift the car into drive and pull out of the ditch, but it was completely stuck in the mud. The angle was so steep that I could barely even jam my door open. I finally crawled out of the wreckage and scrambled up to the side of the road. Looking at my ruined car, I just wanted to crawl under a rock and disappear. I had no phone, no service, and no idea what to do.
As I was sitting on the asphalt, practically grieving, I saw two bright headlights slowly piercing through the thick fog. A massive pickup truck was crawling down the road. For a split second, I thought about flagging them down, but a gut instinct told me to just stay quiet. The truck drove past me slowly, stopped about 20 feet ahead, and then shifted into reverse. It backed right up until it was sitting directly next to me. The driver rolled down the window. Inside was an older couple. The woman was sitting in the passenger seat, and she looked out at me with this overly sweet smile and said, "Oh, sweetheart, looks like you're in a whole mess of trouble. Do you need some help?" I didn't answer right away. They seemed nice enough, but this was the first car I had seen in hours, and it was the middle of the night in nowhere, Pennsylvania. Nice or not, my alarm bells were starting to ring, and honestly, they just didn't look like the most inviting people. She asked me again if I needed help, and out of sheer desperation, I just nodded. Suddenly, this massive, heavy-set man stepped out of the driver's side and walked to the bed of the truck to grab a massive towing chain. While he was doing that, the older woman got out of the passenger side and started walking toward me. As she got close, a wave of an absolutely horrific smell hit me. It was nauseating. But what was weirder was the way she was walking. She was intentionally inching closer and closer to me, basically crowding my personal space and forcing me to back up toward the rear of their truck. She started talking about the local land, and then, out of nowhere, she went into this bizarre, aggressive government conspiracy rant. I just kept nodding and agreeing with her, completely uncomfortable, but I just wanted to see them hook up the chain and pull my car out so I could get out of there. She was practically bumping into my chest at this point, completely backing me up against the tailgate of the truck. Suddenly, she stopped ranting. She went dead silent and smiled this deeply unnerving, wicked smile. She looked at me and said, "You know,
I want to show you something really cool in the back of the truck."
A massive wave of dread hit my stomach. I stepped back and said, "No, that's okay. I should probably go help your husband with the chain." But every time I tried to step away, she would literally shift her body to cut me off. She kept insisting, her voice getting sharper. "No, you really, really need to look in the back of the truck." Right then, I noticed the large man with the chain walking up from the other side. Both of them were closing in on me, trapping me against the tailgate. I instinctively turned around and glanced into the bed of the truck. There was a massive, heavy tarp covering something large, but before I could even process what it was, the old woman screamed at the top of her lungs, "Paul!" In a split second, the tarp flew open and a third person, a younger, deranged-looking man, lunged out from underneath it, wielding a massive hunting knife. He slashed at me, trying to grab my throat with his other hand. I still don't know how, but pure adrenaline kicked in. I dodged his grip by basically throwing myself backwards onto the ground. The second I hit the dirt, the old woman began frantically screaming at the two men to catch me. I scrambled to my feet and ran as fast as humanly possible. I didn't stay on the road. I knew they'd just chase me down in the truck or shoot me. Instead, I bolted straight into the pitch-black woods. I could hear the younger guy tearing through the brush right behind me, but thank God I was younger and faster. I sprinted deep into the forest until I couldn't hear him anymore, and I hid behind a massive tree, holding my breath. Since my phone was dead, I had no idea how long I was hiding out there. It felt like agonizing hours. Every tiny snap of a twig or rustle of a leaf made me think they were right on top of me. Just as I was finally gathering the courage to sneak back toward the road, I heard a voice cutting through the fog. It was the old woman. She was out in the woods, searching for me. She kept calling out in this sickeningly sweet sing-song voice, "Where are you, sonny boy? Come on out. Everything is okay. We got your car out of the ditch for you. We didn't mean to scare you, sweetheart. Come on back." Her voice was close, so close that if I even stepped on a dry leaf, she would have heard it. She was trying to bait me out of the darkness. I squeezed my eyes shut, held my breath, and prayed to God she would walk the other way. After what felt like an eternity, her voice faded out and the woods went completely silent. I waited a long time before I finally crept out of the tree line and back to the road. My car was exactly where it had crashed, still stuck deep in the ditch. The old bitch had been lying. But what made my stomach turn was that all of my car doors were thrown wide open. My luggage had been dragged onto the road and completely ripped apart. They had stolen all of my clothes, my money, and my belongings. And before they left, they had used that hunting knife to violently shred and slash up my car seats. Their truck was gone, but I knew I couldn't stay there. I had a terrifying feeling that if I stayed with the car, they would come back to finish the job.
I just started walking. I walked for miles through the freezing fog until just as the sun was starting to come up, I finally stumbled upon a 24-hour gas station. I burst through the doors, looking like an absolute maniac, covered in mud, shivering and completely traumatized. The cashier wouldn't let me use his personal phone, but seeing the sheer panic on my face, he called the police. When the cops finally showed up, they contacted my parents, and a few hours later, my brother drove out to pick me up. Unfortunately, the local police were absolutely useless. They never found that truck, and they never found that family. Sitting in the passenger seat of my brother's car in the middle of the day, I was still shaking. I can't even begin to comprehend what the intentions of those backwoods freaks actually were. They didn't just want to rob me. If they just wanted my money, they wouldn't have hidden a man with a knife under a tarp. Whatever they wanted to do to me out in those woods, it was 1,000,000 times worse. That was the absolute last time I ever drove anywhere far at night alone, and it will be the last time I ever take that drive again.